Hi, Josh Barker with Remax Town & Country Real Estate. This month we're going to be talking about whether or not there's really a housing bubble here in Shasta County. Now, if you've been paying attention at all to any of the recent news reports that have been coming out, they've been asking that question, is there a housing bubble? Is there a housing bubble forming? Now, if you look outside of our area, places like Sacramento, the Bay Area, Southern California, some of those hotter markets where their economies are extremely strong, primarily fueled by the tech industry, you are beginning to see some signs of a bubble forming in those marketplaces, just strictly based on excessive wages. Now, if we zoom in here for just a minute and talk about real estate in Shasta County, as you all know, our economy is pretty much flat. We haven't seen any dramatic changes or shifts in income, and so we really are dealing with a very balanced market. Just to go backwards for a minute, let's just talk about what this market looked like in the past when we were in a housing bubble. If we go back to 2006, which most people would agree is probably close to the peak of our market, nearly 50% of all the loans that were funded at that point, okay, and this is almost over 10 years ago now, in that last bubble, almost 50% of them were subprime loans, meaning that the government wanted to allow more buyers to get into the housing market. So what did they do? They lowered the credit score requirements. They lowered the requirements for work history and tax returns, allowing more buyers to enter the market. And when they did that, it automatically caused buyer demand to increase, and it caused our prices to also go up as a result. The other thing that's interesting is that nearly 30% of purchases back then were either investment or speculation. So there were investors that were buying from out of the area with really little down. I mean, close to 10% down in some cases. And there was a lot of speculators too who were buying properties strictly just to hold on to them for a year or so and then resell them for a profit a year later. So you had almost 30% of sales, or a little bit over that were taking place that were speculation. The other part too is that 40% of loans back in 2006 were on what we would call inferior loan products. These were like negative amortization loans or interest-only loans. And the challenge with these types of loan products is that they usually have a balloon payment in 3, 5, or 7 years, or the payment is actually reset and increases. So back then what happened is a lot of folks got those types of loans, and then when they couldn't afford the higher payment, those properties fell into foreclosure. And then finally, new construction back in 2006 was at an all-time high. Everywhere you looked, you saw sticks going up, and there was a huge resupply of inventory to the market that was taking place at the same time that we had all these crazy loose lending guidelines taking place. So there was just this perfect recipe for a crash, okay? Now let's go to what things are looking like today. If you were to look in Shasta County today at the housing market, there's a few things that show us that it's a very stable market. First of all, 90% of all purchases right now here locally, and actually it's over 90%, are all prime loans, meaning that these are high quality buyers with good credit scores, great work history, good tax returns. So these are very solid buyers that are coming into the market right now. That's what's happening today. Next is that only roughly 10% of the market currently is speculating. So most of the speculators buying just to hope for appreciation, most of those guys aren't even here right now. What we are seeing is about 10% of our sales are going towards investors who are buying properties for long-term hold, okay, which is nothing wrong with that. That's a good number or good percentage in relationship to the market. Next thing is that negative amortization and interest-only loans. I can't tell you, honestly, the last time I've seen one. It's got to have been at least 8 years since I've seen a loan product like that in our market. So we don't have anybody doing neg am or interest-only loans. These folks are buying homes on 30-year fixed or 15-year fixed mortgages. And kind of the theory is that if you can afford that payment today, and because it's not going to reset in the future, we can all assume that you can afford it next year or the year after that. So buyers buying homes right now with these really good solid loans that are fixed for an extended period of time, that just shows that we have even more stability in the market. And then finally, it's just the new construction. Not that it's a good thing that there's not a lot of new construction, but that is a sign that we're not dealing with an inflated housing market at this point, because we don't see a lot of massive amounts of new construction coming to the market. And because of that, our supply is really under control right now. We're not outpacing with supply versus demand, so we have stability in the housing market. So that's what the market looks like here locally right now. And that is also the reason why I feel comfortable saying that I don't see a housing bubble forming here locally at this point. Now let's talk for just a minute about what the signs would be that we're beginning to go into a housing bubble. Okay, so right now we are not in a bubble. In order to have a bubble, we're going to have a massive appreciation in the housing market to create the bubble in the first place. And I'll share with you what some of those signs might be. Number one, we'll have to see more subprime loans coming back into the market. And we'll have to start seeing lenders loosening the guidelines, seeing credit score requirements drop. We'll have to start seeing employment verifications begin to become less or cumbersome. We would likely have to see tax returns not be as important as they were in the past. I mean, they'll have to start allowing that to happen. We don't have any signs of that, but if we start seeing that, that could be a sign that we're beginning to increase or beginning to inflate a bubble. The next thing is just increased speculation. Right now, like I said, it's just over 10% of sales are investor or speculators. If we started to see that number creeping up into that 20, 25, 30% range, we could be concerned that we're beginning to overinflate our market. Again, a sign that we have not seen. Next is just bad loan products in general. If we started seeing interest-only loans coming back to the market, if we saw negative amortization loans coming back into the market, that would be a sign that we're beginning to see inflation in the housing market that could create a bubble. We're not seeing that sign yet. And then, of course, finally, massive amounts of new construction. If we saw a huge increase in the amount of new construction taking place in the market right now, that could obviously oversupply the market and then put us in a correction. We're not seeing that sign right now. What we see in construction, most of these homes are being acquired relatively quickly. So in conclusion, there's really not a sign right now that I can see that we're moving into an overinflated housing market that would create the bubble we're talking about. Now, there are two external items that we have to keep in mind. Number one, if the economy nationally and locally becomes cumbersome and people's wages or incomes go down, that could definitely have a negative impact on our market. And then secondly, if we see interest rates increase rapidly over the short period of time, that obviously also could have an impact on home prices as well. These are two things we haven't seen right now, but those are external factors that could change, and you never know when that might happen. So in any case, if you have any other questions about the real estate market here in Shasta County, we're always here to help. Thanks again for your time today. Make it a great day.